Welcome along to Matchday Live, your Leeds Rhinos game day preview show. And it's Rivals Round, which means it can only end in one way today. And that is with Leeds Rhinos taking on Bradford Bulls at Barticard Odsal Stadium. You've already seen Hull KR versus Hull FC and Wigan versus St Helens. So there's only one way to cap it all off. And that's with the Rhinos taking on the Bulls as the West Yorkshire derby is officially back. My name's Dan Hawkhead, a pleasure to have your company as always. I'm joined as always by Jack Conlon from BBC Radio Leeds. Jack, the derby's back. We've got it the first of 3 instalments this year. How much are you looking forward to getting underway at Odsal in a very short amount of time?
Just good to be back, isn't it?
It really is.
It's such a great rivalry. There's been so many fantastic clashes between the Rhinos and the Bulls down the years, throughout the entire history of Super League. It's funny, last week we were talking about Super League's 30th anniversary, and one of the key fixtures throughout that entire time has been Leeds against Bradford. Now, these two sides haven't met in Super League for 12 years, if you can quite believe it. 2014 was the last time they met in Super League. The 2 games they played that season, they shared the spoils. Leeds won the game at Odsal. Bradford won the game here at Headingley.
Quite a dramatic one, if I remember right.
Very much so, yeah. Lee Gaskell scoring late on for Bradford to nick that for the Bulls on that afternoon. But since then, that one Challenge Cup game back in 2019 at Odsal that we probably shouldn't mention too much, just given how that went down. But such a historic rivalry, and I think being back at Odsal, which, I mean, on Odsal itself, it gets its critics. People say that there's parts of that stadium that are crumbling, it's quite dated, etc. Now, a lot of those things may well be true, but for me, it is one of those proper rugby league stadiums. It's got so much history in its walls, in its steps. It's been there for so long. It's seen some unbelievable rugby league occasions. No more so than a lot of those clashes between the Bulls and the Rhinos. So yeah, just so pleased that it's back, and I'm really hoping that the game lives up to its billing this evening.
And it's meant to have a great crowd across. I believe there's over 2,000 Leeds fans travelling over for the game. It really means a lot more, doesn't it, to be travelling to Odsal, to be sort of reliving that 90s, those retro nights where Barry McDermott was hitting Stuart Field and you were getting Danny Maguire finding a way through the line, Paul Deacon just running around the park. It's more nostalgia than anything, isn't it, as well at Odsal? That's the nice thing about it.
Absolutely is, yeah. I was looking this week at some of the clashes at Odsal from years gone by. The one that sticks out in the memory certainly was 2007, which was also the year of the infamous Magic Weekend finish with Jordan Tansey scoring the try that never really should have been for Leeds. But earlier that year, I think only around a month or so earlier, in April of 2007, was Leeds against Bradford at Odsal. Scott Donald scoring in the corner in the last few minutes to nick the game for the Rhinos. That's one that sticks out in my memory certainly, but there's been so many down the years, and some of the names that you reeled off there as well. Yeah, there's been so many fantastic players that have played in this derby too, and Odsal itself has been a great amphitheatre for so many fantastic nights of rugby league, so hopefully tonight will be one of them.
It'd be really interesting because actually looking at the Super League record between these two sides, Bradford just edged Leeds by 3, obviously from that time when Bradford were high and flying in the early 90s. At Odsal in Super League, it's 11 wins apiece, so it will be winners spoils today. Let's look at this Bradford Bulls side. Kurt Heggett is the head coach. He's really turned this side around and given them something, despite being a little bit inconsistent looking at the score sheet. They've played 8, won 4, lost 4 in all competitions, but still nevertheless a really dangerous side. And just looking at how they defend, looking at how they attack as well, you were saying how quick they attack.
Yeah, I think they've surprised a lot of people as well. I think naturally when teams come up from the Championship, when they get promoted, they're almost automatically everyone's pick for, in this case, the bottom 3, but that's really not been the case, as we've already seen with York and their upsets. But I think Bradford are absolutely in that same sort of bracket. Super League record, 3 wins from 6 games. They would have absolutely taken that before a ball was kicked in Super League in 2026. And yeah, they really have stunned some people. Like I said, they had a lot of people predicting them to finish bottom. On account of the squad they had. There's a lot of players in there that have stuck around from their time in the Championship last season and the year before as well, but those players have stepped up. I think a lot of the players they brought in as well have added something. We're going to go through some of their key men, but the style that Kurt Haggerty has got them playing as well is just so unique, and he's made no bones about it. You know, he is different as a coach in what he asks of his players. They've got a very, very fast style that they're almost live by the sword, die by the sword at Bradford in the way
Would you say
they
it's
play.
very much like that Salford style of play?
Absolutely.
Haggerty was under Paul Rowley.
Absolutely.
It's the same kind of style?
Without a doubt. Now, I remember speaking to Kurt Haggerty earlier this season for BBC Radio Leeds and asking him, you know, how many, it was actually ahead of the game against St Helens where he came up against Paul Rowley, and you know, I sort of said, you know, the style you play now, how much do you take from when you were at Salford? And they had a very unique style, a very attack minded. He said, I take a bit from that. I take a bit from all of the places that I've played and I've coached, you know, and that's what sort of built my style of rugby. But I think it is very unique in the way that it is. They're such an entertaining team and will be throughout 2026, I think, but they're going to concede a lot of points. They're going to score a lot of points. I think we saw that in their defeat at Castleford last Thursday. You know, they scored 28 points and still ended up on the losing side at the end of the day. So that is very much the kind of Bradford that we can come to expect to see, I think, for the rest of this year, and already have seen, where in attack they are so front-footed that they will attack from anywhere on the pitch. They could be 10 metres out from their own try line and they'll still look at where the spaces are and where they could move the ball to. Defensively, that, you know, does come with consequences, that they will be a bit leakier than others will, the other more defence-minded teams. But it's one of those where if they can just outscore their opponents, you know, that I mean, I'm saying the fundamentals of rugby league here, outscore your opponents and you win a game. But you know, that, as basic as it sounds, Bradford are the perfect example of that, because if their attack works in the way that it should do, they don't have to worry too much about conceding as many points as they do in defence.
And where does that attack start? Like, well, it starts in the halves, doesn't it? Which halfback have you picked out as your one to watch for today? Who's really driving that attack?
Well, I'm actually going to choose a converted halfback as to where their attack actually starts, in Joe Mellor, who is playing as a 13 this year, and it's very much a hybrid 13 role, and it's one of the uniqueness. So one of the unique elements of Kurt Haggerty's style and setup and the side that he's built at Bradford. Joe Mellor very much plays as an extra pivot. It's like having an extra halfback out there, where you'll see him in the middle. He gets through a lot of work. His fitness, by the way, is fantastic this year. That's one thing that is really high demanding of him, is having that energy through the middle. He's getting through a lot of work in both attack and in defence, just simply by where he finds himself. But he is the focal point of everything they do. If you watch them, and any time they're on the attack, just about every single time he will be first receiver in the middle, and start off those moves to the left or the right, where you've got Nicarima and Milnes then as those two halves. Again, two fantastic players as well this season so far, by the way. I think Jaden Nicarima very much bringing that form from Salford. I thought he was Salford's standout throughout all the turmoil that they had last year. He was one player that once he was in that side, you'd fancy them a bit more, certainly in attack. Rowan Milnes, I think he's really improved this year. 6 assists already, which for him as a player that's sort of struggled to really find his feet at some of the clubs he's been at Castleford, at Hull KR as well. He was always sort of more so the bridesmaid than the bride, yes. to use that phrase. He never found himself as a first choice. He's gone back to Bradford, where of course he started out his career, and you know, he is Kurt Haggerty's 7. When he's fit, he's Kurt Haggerty's 7, and you can see why as well. He's really improved his running game, I think, this year in that side. He's always been a really good general. I've found had a good kicking game. He's got a really good left foot, and he's always sort of marshalled the team well. This year, his running game has added an extra element to his game as a player. You know, he's not afraid to take on the line, take it right into the teeth of defence, throw a dummy, find a good pass. You know, he's really upped that bravery when it comes to actually taking on the line. And I think that's made him a much better player. But yeah, I think that those 3 for Bradford, and there's other players who we'll come on to as well shortly, but I think those 3 in particular, when they are on, they know this style really well now. They've had a full pre-season under Kurt Haggerty. They've found their feet in Super League as well. And that combination of Mellor with Milnes on the left, Nicarima on the right, like I say, when they are on, they are really lethal. But Joe Mellor, for me, being the focal point of that in the middle, starts that all off. And not to mention as well, by the way, Joe Mellor's defensive work. He's Super League's top tackler as well. So like I say, his fitness is absolutely tip top, and he is such a crucial player both in attack and defence for them.
Like you said, though, I think for Bradford to be really efficient in their offense, in their attack, they have to back well defensively and be able to defend on the line and put themselves out there. And Mellor's a great example of that as a player as well, who has really had an up and down sort of career when you think about his time with Widnes and then later with Salford alongside Nicarima. Actually, for him to now be finding some consistency and towards the back of his career be really peaking, it must be a great thing for Bradford fans to be able to say we've got the best version of him, when it wasn't a bad player at Widnes, mind. But now they can go, we've got the best version of him. They've definitely got the best version of Nicarima despite his time in the NRL, at the Catalans. They've got the best version of him as well. It must just be a great time to be a Bradford fan as well, and seeing this attack really just blooming.
Well, it's funny as well that with Mellor, and you mentioned sort of the ages out there, as you say, he's coming into the sort of twilight years of his career. And how often do you find that a player hitting that age all of a sudden is asked to do something completely different to what he's done for his entire career beforehand? You know, he's sort of built this career so far as, certainly in recent years, as a hooker, started out as a half. You know, he's very much been in those sorts of positions, whereas now, in 2026, in this new Bradford side, their captain as well, he was given the captaincy at the start of the season, but he's being asked to play a completely different role to anything he's done before, you know, which it can go to one of two ways. You can have players that kick back and are like, no, I know what I'm good at, I know what I want to do. Or, seemingly has been the case with Mellor, he can go into it open-minded and be like, yeah, you know what, I'm going to try and carve out this new version of myself as a rugby league player. And that's certainly what I think he's doing in that Bradford side in 2026. So he's such a key part of their side. And, you know, yeah, you mentioned the defence there, and like I sort of touched on earlier, live by the sword, die by the sword. They're going to score a lot of points. They're probably going to concede a lot. They get through a lot of defensive work to Bradford. If you look at Super League's tackling stats, I think 3 Bradford players are in the top 10 for that, and 2 of them are at the top in Joe Mellor and Ryan Sutton. They're the 2 top tacklers in Super League, and that is just indicative of the work that Bradford do get through in defence, but in part because of their style and attack. They're a very hard-working team, you know, and I think that's one sort of strand that you can pull from everything we've talked about so far about Bradford. They are very hard-working, and that's one thing that you know for a fact going into a game. That's what you're going to get from this Bulls side. I think the real proof in the pudding will be later down the line, later on in the season, where you know, you see whether or not fatigue is going to catch up with them, just given the style they play. But certainly in these early rounds of Super League, I think that's partly why they've stunned some teams and why they've got 3 wins on the board, is because they're that hard-working. They've come out of the blocks flying with this unique style, and it's working so far.
And absolutely, they look at their tackle efficiency as well. Just a last note on their defensive efforts, they're the best team for tackle efficiency in the league too.
There you go.
But I think actually at the same time, it's a really good point you bring up about what's this team going to look like in round 17, round 18, when they've had, they've been nearly 20 games thinking that they've got 2 cup games. You know, it's going to be the question, have they got the legs in them, isn't it, at the end of the day? But on defence, one more time, one other player we want to bring up, Ryan Sutton, come back to the Super League. He's back from a long spell in the NRL after coming through Wigan's system and winning 2 grand finals with them. He's just been an absolute force and a weapon up front for them in terms of their forward pack, which is also stacked as it is, looking at the players they brought in during the off-season.
And I think when you talk about longevity, he's probably one player that you'd look to in that sense. Now, Bradford have had a few injuries already in Super League this year. A lot of those injuries have come in the forwards as well, in particular those middle forwards. Ryan Sutton has been one player that has been a constant, and I think that's been really key actually for Kurt Haggerty, is having him there as that sort of leading forward. Now, Joe Mellor is the captain, but there's no doubt that Ryan Sutton is one of the leaders in that Bradford squad, and there's been times this year where he's been forced to be pushed out to an edge. You know, he's played as a back rower, again just simply down to injuries they've picked up in games, but at the same time he's shown the same determination, the same drive in that position as he did in the middle. Now, he's back in Super League after a rocky spell, I think it's fair to say, in the NRL.
I think that's fair.
Yeah, I think the last couple of seasons he didn't play much first team rugby. Ended up playing a bit in the State Cup at reserve grade over there, and that's not why he went over there. He went over there to play in the NRL, played a decent bit for Canberra, but has very much sort of tailed off. Come back to Super League in the hope of revitalising his career, and I think on early evidence he is on track to doing that. As I say, he's one of the key men for Kurt Haggerty. Certainly when you're looking at forwards, he is one of the leaders of that pack. Second in the Super League stats for tackles. Again, gets through so much work. In attack as well, he always puts his hand up to take those tough drives up the middle, even when they are coming out of yardage. He's a very, very, very good little piece of business, I think, from Bradford. And I don't know how many suitors he had over here when he was looking at coming back in the off season, but I think it's a nice fit. Is Ryan Sutton and Bradford. They needed a name. They needed someone who has got that Super League experience, who, when he was over here before at Wigan, was part of a really good pack and had really...
Unbelievable pack, thinking about what they had during that time with Sean Wayne.
Fantastic pack under Sean Wayne, and he again was a big part of that, and I think he was a really nice piece of business from Bradford, and one that's probably not been talked about as much because of the Nicaraemas that are in there, because Esam Marsa's in there, because of other players that they've signed. Andy Acker's been another one, but I think Sutton was a really, really important signing, and I think that's proven to be the case. And I think as the season goes on, regardless of what they do, if Ryan Sutton stays fit, if he continues to play the rugby that he is doing, again we talk about longevity, then he could turn out to be one of their most important signings on this return to Super League.
I was about to say, it really will depend on what he's like during that back end of the season, where he will be so crucial, just because you mentioned him there. Esam Masters, another great pickup, but how good do you think Walker Blake's going to be as well, and Ethan Ryan as well coming back to Bradford? They've actually... they've assembled some great halves. They've assembled a strong forward pack, but their outside backs are really finding the space. They're finding the tries, more importantly, which is getting them on the board. Does it start with having two absolute weapons of centres in Masters and Blake?
I think it does, and you mentioned that left edge. Blake and Ryan on that left edge have scored 11 tries between them in all competitions this year. That is a lethal left edge for Bradford, and they've got a cohesion as well now, as well of those two. Obviously, Ryan, a new signing this year. He played the back end of last year at Oldham. Blake is very much on that sort of redemption arc at the minute. He was great in the Championship for Bradford last year after, again, not the happiest of periods at St Helens, where, he fell out of the team. A lot of fans really just weren't having him at all. Dropped down to Bradford and was a revelation in the Championship, and is now... again, on early evidence, replicating that form at Super League level, which is good to see for the Bulls. So that left edge for them is really lethal. Masters, you'll see, will play a bit of a different role, and it's very much a role he had at Salford, which he roams a bit more. He doesn't stick in that right centre position. And
okay,
I always find it fascinating when I watch him play, because, like I said, Joe Mellor is a different role this season. He's got that sort of middle pivot role as a loose forward, starting off those attacks. Now, Masters will just chime in here, there, everywhere, wherever he fancies at the time. He will come out off that right centre position and just pop up in the middle of the field. And I remember him doing it a bit for Salford, actually, because of his abilities. He's got good handling. He's very astute as a ball runner and as a decision maker as well. Hence why he's played a bit in the halves and at full back when he was at Huddersfield, for example. When he was at Salford, he was dropped in there as a bit of a backup option. Because he's got those abilities and those attributes, he can just chime in and again just add another pivot, another danger man into that Bradford attack. So absolutely expect him to do that. He's good in the right centre spot, but he will sort of crab inside and just try and pop up and get in and around the ball, which I think is when he's most dangerous. So yeah, those two centres, that 3 and that 4 of Masters and Blake, I think again they've got experience. They are both quality players in this Bradford side. Again, crucially, know the system, know the style, and it really works for them. So, yeah, I think they're a team that have got weapons in various areas of the pitch, but that left edge is one where don't be surprised if tonight they really do try and target their left. Leeds is right with Ryan Hall and Jack Bird, as we expect it to be, because Blake and Ryan, 11 tries between the pair of them, they've been really good this season.
I was about to say that's going to be a real job for Jack Bird, coming off a great performance here at AMT Headingley last time out against Warrington, whether it be his job, whether it be James McDonnell. Defensively, the Rhinos have got to say, I've got to look up at this because they did a really good job with both. I would say Toby King bar the try down at this side of the field, and definitely Albert Hopewati. They had them both locked down. Like I said with Masters, though, very different type of player. But the Rhinos coming into this one, surely will be with a little bit of confidence, but obviously wary about what Bradford could do, looking at what you've just said.
I think one of the really interesting battles, just going back to the Warrington game, was Ash Handley against Albert Hopewati. Now, I think we saw in the first half in particular, Handley was constantly trying to get on the outside of Hopewati, and Hopewati was living up to it and had his number, very much so. Now, it was a fascinating battle in the fact that back and forth, again, Hopewati trying to get the better of Handley in attack. Handley had his number. So that first half in particular, I think they had the measure of each other. In the second half, and as the game went on, and again, we talk about longevity. We've said that word plenty in the last sort of 20 minutes or so. But that second half, you started to see fatigue setting in, I think, on Hopewati's side. Handley started to get the better of him, was finding his way on the outside. He made that half break that led to Brodie Croft's try down that left edge in the far corner over there. And that was a real indication just of that individual battle and the persistence as well of Ash Handley. He was trying different things to try and get past Hopewati, whether it go on his inside shoulder, his outside shoulder, try and skip around the outside and find offloads. Now, it didn't come off for most of the game, but crucially, when it mattered, it did. And he made enough of a dent in that Warrington line to then open up some space and allow Connor and Croft to create that try. So that was one really interesting area, I thought, when you looked at that Warrington game and those sort of individual battles. And I think we will get some similar ones tonight as well. We've already mentioned that Bradford left edge. Jack Bird was defensively brilliant.
I thought he was as well. I thought he was absolutely brilliant.
On his home debut, his first start for the Rhinos as well, he was really, really good in that right centre spot defensively. He'll have a different challenge in Wonga Blake, different sort of player to what Toby King is. Bit rangier.
And definitely a familiar player, knowing obviously them both playing in the NRL around the same time too, so probably familiar with each other's styles too.
Agreed. He'll know what he's coming up against, but Blake, a bit of a rangier player, he's got a good offload in him, and when I say good offload, he loves a little basketball pass over the top. He gets his arms free quite well. Ryan Hall as well up against Ethan Ryan on that edge. Another individual battle, very, very different players. I think when you look across the pitch, and we'll see the 217s very shortly, but I think across that pitch there will be a lot of really interesting little individual battles opposite. But I just wanted to pick up on that Handley against Hopewati one, because I thought that was fascinating to watch on Sunday.
Oh, absolutely. And before we get into our proper head-to-head, I feel like we've already done our kind of little head-to-head, our proper head-to-head. Brad Arthur obviously will be picking apart Bradford, and here were just some of his thoughts earlier in the week ahead of taking on the Bulls.
I've seen plenty of highlights and replays of it, and didn't realise until you see some of the guys that actually played in some of those teams, some quality footballers. And so look, we've got a role to play in the history of it, and both teams I'm sure, will make sure they go out there and have a crack. Every time sort of Parramatta played Penrith, the Battle of the West was pretty important. Easter Monday clash against West Tigers. Anytime we played the Bulldogs, so there's a fair bit of rivalries in the NRL, and I'm looking forward to this, and especially being away too. Like it's a bit more hostile for you. So like these sort of things, hopefully bring out the best in players. Yeah, well they're nice and physical out of the backfield with their outside backs. They carry strong. They'll shift 5 metres off their try line. It doesn't matter. So they're willing to chance their hand a little bit, and their spine combined well, and through the middle third of the field with Ackers out of dummy half with his deception. So they're a threat right across the board, So you can't afford to try and isolate any one attacker too much. It's about keeping our line intact and minimising the opportunities we give them.
So just some of Brad Arthur's thoughts there, and one key player Jackie's picked up there, and he is a crucial part of our head-to-head, is Andy Ackers going up against Danny Levi in that hooker position. Ackers being picked up by Brad there for his deception and the way that he really runs, and it's the start point. for Bradford's attack. How impressive you be with just how he's fitted in quite seamlessly with the Hegarty system, which another player, I guess, who knows that quite well.
He's playing some of his best rugby. I think he's back to that level for me, like we saw at Salford when he got that England call up a few years back. He's playing a style of rugby that I think really suits him now. Brad Arthur will know him really well, obviously, from his time here at Leeds. Right. He found it difficult to get into the team last year here at the Rhinos, but has gone to Bradford, has become their main man at 9 at hooker, and he's all the better for it, I think, as well. Like I say, he suits that role. He's quick out of dummy half. I think it benefits him having a Mella in and around that middle area as well. I think it really does benefit him. When it comes to making those decisions, when to dart out, when to find a pass, when to look for support runners, I think that really benefits him. We're seeing as well in defence, he looks really good. We mentioned earlier on just how much defence Bradford get through, and Ackers is a really, really key part of that. 212 tackles, I think I make it for him this year. On the stats, he's 8th in the Super League's tackle stats as well, so gets to a lot of defence in the middle. But I think quite a similar player to Danny Levi in just how quick they both are in attack. I think Levi, we've seen already a bit of a development in him as a player in this Leeds team. Started out in the first few games off the bench just to inject a bit of pace after half an hour or so to come up with Jared O'Connor in that role and just quicken up the ruck a bit. He's now doing that from the start, which I thought was a really interesting decision to make by Brad Arthur. There's quite a clear indication there for me that he wants that pace from early on. He wants to really put teams under pressure around the ruck from minute one, and that is why Levi is starting, to quicken up that ruck from the start and hopefully do long minutes as well. I think we've seen him do quite a fair bit of that.
He did at least an hour here against Warrington.
Exactly. You've obviously got Jared O'Connor as that other option. O'Connor can play anywhere in that middle unit for Leeds. So, again, he's got that versatility to come on and add something wherever he is put. But I think Levi is unique in this Leeds team in that he does just have that pace around the ruck, and it's a simple thing to say because there's not a lot else that you can really dive into it other than he just has that speed of thought, but also that speed of feet as well, where he can just dart out, and if he sees a gap, if he sees there's a lazy marker or a marker that's not properly set yet, he knows exactly where to run it. And I think you see all the best halfbacks do that. Again, just one of the battles we had against Warrington was Danny Walker, who tries to do that as well. He's so good at spotting when there's a marker that's down on the floor still, and he can get around them and knows exactly how to manipulate that ruck area. Danny Levi is very similar for me, and I thought he was a great pickup in the off-season when Leeds signed him. I really did. I remember what he was like at Huddersfield. I think his style suits Super League very well. He was great for the Giants. They were gutted when he left.
I know they were.
Exactly. He had a decent little run over back in the NRL at Canberra. Fell away from their first team a bit, but again, their loss is the Rhinos' gain because he started this season really, really well. And again, I think he's one of the key parts of what Brad Arthur wants to do with this Leeds team. And I think he also suits, actually, Super League this season and the way that the rule changes have come about in that they are trying to quicken up the game. I think having a player like Danny Levi is really of a benefit to the Rhinos, just again in how his game suits Super League, suits the quickness, suits the sped-up rucks. He's the kind of player that can really make the most of that, and I think he already is. But, back to Andy Ackers. It's quite hard to really separate those two players. I think Levi's the quicker when it comes to actually getting out of dummy half and making the most of those little opportunities. But I think Ackers is very good at that as well. But perhaps his defence is what is winning out when you look at those two as individuals this season.
It's a really interesting battle, like you've said. I think Ackers
it's hard to pick who's better, actually. It really is.
I couldn't tell you which one is. I don't think I could go, that one definitively is better than the other one, just because I think Ackers will have something to prove. I think he will come out with a bit of a chip on his shoulder. He'll know that he'll want to prove what he could have done here at Leeds, and like he's already shown it this year, just how he can play. So he'll be out there. I think Danny Levi's been really underrated. I really do. He's just the way he's slotted into the spine. It's not an easy spine to come into, by the way, in that you've got Miller, Croft, and Connor. That seems to be that real trio that's off the back of last year worked really well together. They've started to really enhance that combination. He's it's essentially added to that, and that's nothing against Jared O'Connor. I know we've said that a few times on the show recently. That's not to his detriment. I just think Levi provides that little bit more experience. He provides that a little bit more grunt. Like, he's prepared to throw his body out there. He's prepared to throw in the tackles. He's prepared to run out dummy half. And I think Leeds, like you say, are absolutely all better for it. He's part of an unchanged 21-man squad name this week. Is that a good thing for the Rhinos? Or when you look at the 5 players who have been in and around, so that's Presley Cassell, Chris Hankinson, Jeremiah Matauti, Ethan O'Neill, and Harry Newman obviously missed the Warrington game. How do those guys get into this team, if they can get into it, or even in the coming weeks?
You're waiting for players to go down, and I think that is literally the key part to it. You are waiting for players to pick up injuries or pick up suspensions for those gaps to open, because I don't think, why would you change that winning side? I think certainly going into this Bulls game now, Brad Arthur hinted in his presser this week that he might make a couple of rotations in the forwards. Does that open a gap for perhaps a Cassell or a Matautia to drop onto the bench, at the expense of one of those middle forwards that might just get the week off? You really don't know. It's really hard to tell, but I think a couple of those players, when you're looking at Harry Newman being one now, we said last week we were trying to decide, I remember ahead of the Warrington game, who was going to drop out, because Jack Bird was going to be in, Chris Hankinson was going to be in, Ryan Hall was going to be in, so it was going to be potentially between one of those three, and I don't think any of us really expected him to get the chopping board out and leave out Harry Newman, but that is what Brad Arthur did. It was a big call to make, but it paid off given how Jack Bird played. Now, for me, that is Jack Bird's shirt now. He is that right centre, and until his performances start to drop off, or, of course, if there's a knock to Ash Handley or to one of those wingers, that's when perhaps Harry Newman comes back into the reckoning. But up until then, that is a settled backline for me. And that is just that just comes with having the depth that Leeds have got this season, and having, touch wood, not many injuries just so far, and as of yet. So it's a product, like I say, of having depth in your squad. There'll be no more frustrated players than Ethan O'Neill and Jeremiah Matautia, who were hoping to come to Leeds this season as new signings, have an impact, play games. That's not been the case so far. But who would you really take out of that team to put them in for? O'Neill plays as a back rower. He plays as an edge forward. James McDonald's been great. Callum Watkins has been great. They are both key components in that team. You would drop neither of them at the minute with how they're playing either. So it's tough, and it's one part that I absolutely don't envy of Brad Arthur and being a head coach full stop in professional sport, because these are the tough decisions that you absolutely have to make, and that's I guess why you earn the money. You make these tough calls and hope they pay off. If they don't pay off, that's when you then reassess, I guess, and look at whether or not you've got wiggle room to get these players back in to try and change something up. But right now, especially on the back of what was a fantastic performance against Warrington, a game, by the way, which the Rhinos very much won. It wasn't a case of Warrington losing that. The Rhinos won that game because it was an arm wrestle. Warrington played well. Leeds just played better. It wasn't an off day for the Wolves whatsoever. No. Leeds played better and forced a win out of that game. Why would you drop anyone? That is the question, and I don't see, again, unless he's wanting to rotate, give a couple of players a rest, shorter turnaround, let's not forget.
Absolutely.
Much
That's
shorter
a really good
turnaround
point.
than what Bradford have got. Bradford do Thursday to Friday, Leeds do Sunday to Friday, so that is a factor. That could be a factor. That would be the only reason for me, for Brad Arthur to make any changes to that 17.
And just a really quick note, because we talked about it this week, talking about that forward pack, talking about the edge. Matauti is going up against Michaletsky, who's obviously his time in a lead shirt is well documented. Keenan Palacia, I could rave along about that guy for quite a while, because he's a first name on a team sheet for me, and he's an absolute lockdown as a prop each week. And then you've got Cooper Jenkins in there coming off the bench as well, and Tom Holroyd, who were almost doing little short spells, they were doing between 10-15 minutes on Sunday. Like you said, it seems really settled, doesn't it? It's
exactly the point. Which of those names would you drop to bring in a Matautia, to bring in a Presley Cassell? Who would you drop out of that side? for me, there's none that you can. Palacia just on him, outstanding, I think, in 2026 so far. Even a couple of weeks ago in that really disappointing afternoon at Hull FC when no one really covered themselves in glory, for me, Palacia was one consistent figure throughout that game that can actually hold his hand up and say, yeah, I did a decent job, because he was relentless through the middle. And that's very much what we've come to recognise and know of Keenan Palacia. Again, similar against Warrington, just had that intensity through the middle. And I think at times when you've got a forward like that, he almost drags everyone with him as well. You know, his intensity inspires those around him in that middle group. And I think when you've got a player like Palacia, who is experienced as he is in his late 20s at the minute, you've got a relatively, not so much a young pack, but a pack of players in their sort of mid-20s like that. When you've got a leader like that, dragging those players with him and, you know, inspiring those around him, I think can be so important. I think he's perfect for that.
And when he absolutely knocked George Williams for 6, that's always a great winner as well.
I think that was probably the moment in which, as much as Warrington, you know, did push that game close towards the end, I think that's the moment where there was a wry smile on George Williams' face after he got that hit, to be like, yeah, I recognise that I've just been whacked there. And I think that was probably a moment of recognition where maybe the Rhinos are going to stay on top in this game, and they did. And
just 3 changes for Bradford. They've got Zach Fulton, Elliot Poposhi and Joe Keys coming in. Joe Keys obviously scored at that great length of the field try in Cam Smith's testimonial game here, dropping. They're obviously coming in, but I can't really see them maybe breaking into what... I know they had a tough result at Cass, but I think Hegarty will maybe go like for like again this week.
We'll see. I think Zach Fulton's probably the main one that you look at that will probably come back into the side. I think Keys will struggle to get in, especially if Nicarima and Milnes are both fit, which we think they are. They're both named as well. No indication they're not. So I think Keys will miss out. Poposh is an interesting one. He was very much on the fringe at the start of the season. They do like him at Bradford. He does like him, does Kurt Hegarty. You know, he's a bit of an up-and-comer, and he didn't play a whole lot in the Championship last year, so I think it was a surprise really when he was 18th man for a couple of games at the start of the year, got a couple of games off the bench, got that suspension then, so as that knocked him back down the pecking order a bit, we'll wait and see, especially given the fact that they've made a couple of mid-season signings, haven't they, Bradford already, in Jack Ormonroyd, Phoenix Steinweed, who came in as well last week.
It's his home debut today, by the way, as well.
It is, yeah, as well, so they've got options there, certainly in the middle, but I think Zach Fulton is one player that will probably come straight back into the reckoning for me. He's been one of their standouts throughout their Championship campaigns in the last couple of years. Was a big signing as well when they brought him over from the Manly Sea Eagles. You know, he was a youngster breaking into that Manly forward pack and then just got plucked up by Bradford, which not a lot of people were really expecting, I don't think. Got famous heritage as well. Bob Fulton is his grandfather, NRL legend. So, you know, he comes from good pedigree, I guess. So I think he will probably slot back into that back row for them, which is an area they have been a bit light in, actually, in recent weeks with him out. You know, they've had Ed Chamberlain there, they've had Leon Ruin play there, Steinweed adds another option there, but I think he will probably drop into that starting side. Otherwise, not too many changes, I don't imagine.
Well, we will find out. Team news is coming next. Now, if you've not got a ticket for tonight's game, here's just how you can stay in touch with everything that's happening from Bartercard Odsal. Sky Sports have the game, so you can watch it live. That's on as a bonus stream, so you need to go down to Rugby League, and then the bonus stream shows up there. We're not on a main channel this week. But Super League Plus customers, we are definitely on there. If you've got that, you can just find our stream and start watching. In terms of radio coverage, there's only one place that will push you guys, and that is towards our great friends at BBC Radio. Leeds, Jack?
So we've got full build-up and commentary of tonight's game. James Dayton and former Rhinos assistant coach Barry Eaton alongside him as well. That's from 7 o'clock is when the build-up starts on all BBC Radio Leeds frequencies and online worldwide via BBC Sounds as well, so you can take them with you.
I absolutely envy him because I think it's going to be a great occasion to commentate on tonight. If not, then social media is your one-stop coverage. We're at Leeds Rhinos across everything: X, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok and YouTube, to catch all the in-game comments, all the post-game reaction as well from Brad Arthur and the players. That's the only place that you can catch it all. My thanks to Jack, as always, a great guest on this one. My name's been Dan Hawkhead, and team news is coming next.